Alors, on va faire le panel en anglais et je vais juste dire 2 mots avant de commencer en français. Je suis très content d'être ici à Montréal. J'ai eu la chance, il y a quelques jours, d'avoir une première discussion téléphonique avec nos panélistes qui ont vraiment différents points de vue sur la question. Je suis extrêmement excité, honoré d'animer cette discussion. And I will start with just a few words about, because we tried to understand, what the subject of the conference was all about. And I guess what is really important is that we need to kind of just start from the point of view that arts and culture are essential for human life, but they are becoming more and more an essential dimension of any human journey. And when we talk about arts and culture, we also have this ongoing discussion all over the world about the transforming power of art and the capacity of arts to challenge and bring and provoke and create spaces for discussions on many different subjects that are of importance for us as human beings, like inclusion, diversity, sustainable change, social justice, and the decolonization of our cultural spaces. Those questions are really important, and the question today of this panel is how can cultural spaces truly become spaces for citizens? But before opening the discussion, I'd like to focus on the concept of space and give it as much latitude as possible for an open discussion. In a nutshell, I would like the conversation to explore every possible direction. Even though the term space can refer to a demarcated area, it does not always mean that. Space, essentially cultural space, can be relational. In this regard, I'm thinking of relational spaces in activities such as cultural mediation, social cohesion, reciprocal cultural exchanges, education, social development, or even cultural diplomacy. The concept of space can also broadly imply respect for rights in terms of freedom, creation of expression, while also outlining the issues around occupying or accessing such space are simply lacking it, especially in the digital era. First, I would like us to clarify this concept of cultural spaces in order to understand what it represents for both artists and citizens. Here again, please think about space in terms of all its realities, physical or mental space, are spaces of trust, knowledge, and acknowledgement. After that, we will have a discussion to try to define what the cultural spaces of the future should be. And third and last, we will kind of wrap the discussion by trying to, with you, to see what could be the main takeaways of that conversation. So each of the panelists will take a few minutes just to explain where she or he comes from when thinking about cultural spaces and the future of cultural spaces. So we'll start on my right, and we'll do that.
Hi, so I'm Carolyn Ohrt, so I'm a co-artistic director at Danse. Danse, we are a citizen based here in Montreal. We present shows mainly in a large space of 1,400 seats and in a smaller space as well, 300 seats. So we present at La Place des Arts, but we do not own the space, so it's not our own space, really. So we have presented in the past, just to give you an idea, Akram Khan, NDT, Marie Chouinard, and also smaller companies as well. So our space is really our shows, our season. So we cannot act on the actual theater, which we are renting from, but we can act on the shows. So the core of our organization is really the shows. it brings me to the heart of the organization. So as a presenter, we are the meeting point between the public and the artists, the public and the art form. And that's where we can become a citizen space. So our space is the show, and we present the show to a public. So that's where we can act. So how do we make it happen for us? What is the heart of the core? So we try to create a human, and human would be here my key word, a human experience when people do come to the show and to get the audience to come to the show. So our role is we have a big responsibility. We have to find the right show for the right people for the right show, and we have to have a wide audience for a wide variety of shows as well. So how do we make it happen? Like I said, a human experience. But concretely, what do we do in our day-to-day? It doesn't have to be a big thing. So we tell our team all the time, let's work with what we have. We have great artists, we have a stage, and we have that space, which is the show. So we start with small things. It doesn't have to be a big thing. So how do we open a dialogue? If we want to open a dialogue, we are the intermediate between the artist and the public. We need to be there. So like I say, small things, we are there. A whole team, when you come to see a show at Danse, we are present. People can come and talk to us about the shows, and they do, and they tell us what they like, what they didn't like, what they want, what they don't want. So it's being present and open a dialogue. So that's the small things that we do. Other small things, I'm giving examples here. So other small things is get the artists to break the wall as well. People are so afraid they won't understand, and it's such a complicated thing, contemporary dance. So we do talk with the artists and say, let's work together. It's, again, small things. When an artist go to bow at the end and meet with the public, it makes all the difference. If the audience sit in a show and they just don't get what they see, they're not sure, if they see the human being that's behind the show after and they get a contact, even if it's only eye contact, well, that's something more. So there you open up a dialogue as well. And people get out of the show, come out of the show and say, okay, I'm not sure about this, but there's all these human beings behind it. So they feel more touched. We had, for 2 years now, we also have been doing workshops, but for all public workshops as well. So the idea behind that is also for the audience to understand how the creative process works. So it's to demystify all the process. So us being there, being accessible, opening a dialogue is one thing, but getting direct access to the artists is a thing that we're working on, and it's working really, really good. So what we do is we ask for the choreographers, the artistic director that come into town to do workshops on stage with the public. And it's those workshops, people go crazy for them. And they are actually working. We had Ohrt working on and teaching a part of its creation on stage with the public. So then you get the public to understand how it works and to see that it's a person just like them that's actually creating, and it makes them understand the work in another way. And it's an eye-opener, really. We had a workshop with Dada Macedo. We opened up the season with Dada Macedo. So Dada gave a whole workshop with all of her dancers. We had 40 people on stage, and it was just magic. So those are the moments we want to clone when we're thinking about audience development and are the space that we're creating. So I have other examples. Do I have time for this? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, just a bit. So another example, just to break the wall, is we were presenting Danse last week, and we had a big project with a young choreographer from Montreal, Virginie Brunel. And it was really exciting, that project we had with her, because she was going to create for the first time on an international company in Germany. And like, okay, it's really exciting for the artist. There's a great story there, and it's how do we get the public involved? So we created a whole platform. Virginie had a videographer that followed her during her creation from the studio until the premiere in Montreal, so for a year and a half. And we made that accessible to the public, so the public can understand what she was going through. So they came into the show and they actually felt something more and felt more involved. So that's a few things. Of course, there's all the children and the kids experience we're working on as well, but maybe later on. So basically, for us, the more opportunities to create a human experience, to open a dialogue, and that's what we do in our own space. Thank you.
So that's one definition of space, before, during, and after a show. We'll explore another definition of what space can be.
Bonjour. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to continue to learn from my colleagues here. I want to talk a bit about how we approach space at one of my clients, which is the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, located in Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey is a city that's about 79% African American, and it is recovering from economic plight of the 70s, the 60s and the 70s, so it's really on the rise. It has major cultural institutions now, including NJPAC, which is a $45 million performing arts center. But we also have major corporations who have moved their headquarters there, as well as the development of real estate. So it's an exciting time to be in this city. So at New Jersey Performing Arts Center, which just celebrated its 20th anniversary, we approach this concept of space as a borderless campus. We have the privilege of having a building that looks like Lincoln Center in a city that is very devastated. And so for the local residents, this is not a place they're going to come to. They don't see themselves inside. They walk past the building, but they don't come inside the building. So when I ask them, why aren't you coming inside the building? Their response is, oh, I can't go in there. I don't belong in there. I mean, it's too expensive. It's all these answers that they've made up in their heads as to why they can't come. So I created a department at NJPAC called Community Engagement with the sole purpose of connecting with the community where they are and listening to what they would like us to present to them that ultimately will create access to the Arts Center. So we go out. Our department presents over 200 events per year that are in the community, such as jazz. We're a performing arts center, so we present art. And what makes us a mission-based organization are the fine arts that we present, which has low audience attendance. When we present Diana Ross, we sell out. But when we present one of our classical orchestras, we're about 1/3 full. Or with jazz, or, oh gosh, ballet, forget that. So how do we start to change these dynamics locally is by taking NJPAC outside. And so we formed advisory committees to tell us what will this look like. You know, the first step is not to presume you know everything. The best thing is to presume you know nothing. Then you can listen generously from your heart. And so we asked, created a dance advisory committee. I said, what's the best way to start to engage audiences for dance? I said, well, we don't really know what it is you're talking about, so let's do some dance workshops. So we do dance workshops in churches, we do liturgical dance workshops, we work with the Hindu community, we also do events at our synagogue. And so these dance workshops allow people, one, to see what movement looks like. It starts to demystify what you think you don't understand and you realize it's all fun. And it's in your neighborhood. So the second thing we did was with jazz. I created a jazz advisory committee. And the first thing they told me was, Donna, we'd like to experience jazz in an intimate setting. These 3,000-seat theaters is just too overwhelming. Why don't we have jazz jams? It's like, what's that? Well, that's where you invite artists in and they jam. Like, okay. So we did one. And it was very successful. We're now in our 5th year. We do them once a month. They're always always sold out. In fact, we have to have the police there to kind of control the flow because it's become so popular. How did it become popular? One, it's organic. It came from what the community said they wanted. Two, it's the location. So the space is a very inviting place. It is called Clement's Lounge, which is on the campus of Rutgers University. And it's a lounge that was created in honor of an African-American historian who's local from Newark. So there's a sense of pride to go to Clem's place. He passed away suddenly, had an aneurysm. So people have a way to still connect with Clem's life by going to his lounge and hearing jazz. For them, it's the best way to see it. So what happens after these jazz jams? We then have our big jazz festival at the Art Center. So now we're dropping these breadcrumbs to encourage people. You enjoy the jazz jams. Why don't you come and see, Gregory Porter or Diana Reeves as part of the festival? They're much more inclined to do that because they had this great experience in their neighborhood and a familiar space that was welcoming, that they felt they had access to. So we have similar events that we do with that. We have our Latin community advisory group, which also advises us on places to be. So within the Latino community in the Newark area, there are quite a few. We know Latino is a political term, so respectfully it would be the Ecuadorians, the Salvadorians, the Puerto Ricans, Cubans, all of those different groups live within that area. And they will tell us, these are the events happening in my neighborhood. Can you come? Okay, well, what does that mean, can you come? Can you table? Can you hand out information? Can you be present? And so space becomes also being there, standing side by side. And so we do quite a few of those based on the direction of this Latino Advisory Committee. We have our Elders Committee in Newark. Those who stayed during the riots of the 60s are revered, as if you had the stamina to stay there while they were burning down all the buildings and shooting and killing people, you stayed. So these elders are individuals, African-American individuals, who have contributed significantly to the health and the culture of Newark. And so they have advised us of one thing. They said, we are very concerned with young people today. We see them making a lot of mistakes. And so we would like to share some of our wisdom with them on just how to navigate life. So we created a program called Pearls of Wisdom. These programs are held in the community, which is a multi-generational dialogue between these elders who are 65 plus and high school and teenagers. This past week we had one with the theme of grandparents raising grandkids, which is huge, certainly in the States, probably all over the world, but definitely in the States. And so it was a very rich dialogue, hearing from grandkids who've been raised by their grandparents and the challenges that some of the grandparents had. So you're thinking, what does this have to do with the Art Center? It has everything to do with the Art Center, because we're talking about space and access. And so again, the more we have our footprint in the community, the more our space becomes accessible and a place that people feel they'll be celebrated and honored. The only reason we're having this conversation is because there is a feeling that I won't be. And so our job is to break down those barriers, and we can only do it by life-to-life, heart-to-heart connection. It's not through an email, it's not a text. It has to be a person, a face, a smile. Those are the things that create the space for people to feel like, I want to try this, and then I'll come back. So now, after I've been there 7 years now, so now we have this solid core who own the space. They're happy going out to events in their neighborhood, but they also love to come inside the building. They're familiar with where everything is. They kind of know the volunteers and staff. They know where the bathrooms are, the box office. These are the details that help define a space as it being welcoming or not. And so we are looking forward to just continue to expand these innovations.
Thank you. So another definition of space, a place with walls. So you have to go outside of the fortress to open the fortress to the real people.
That's
so
right.
Another vision of that. And then we're moving to a completely different understanding of what the space could be.
Sego Sego Guego, my space is cyberspace. I have a presentation, maybe, but maybe not. We can let it go. I just wanted you to see. It's very hard to visualize at times, but it is a little long. So I think I will actually skip the video that I was going to show you. But this is my avatar. Her name's XOX. And I am the co-director of Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace, as you heard. And the mission of AbTech is to ensure that Indigenous people are present in cyberspace. What is cyberspace? I don't know if I have that slide. No. Cyberspace is websites, machinima, video games, all the virtual spaces that we now hang out in without our real bodies. And if the Initiative for Indigenous Futures is a project of AbTech. After a while working in cyberspace and ensuring that Indigenous people were in cyberspace, we realized that actually Indigenous people were even missing from the future. So I have another space besides cyberspace, which is the future. We wanted to make sure that Indigenous people were also able to see themselves and for other people to see us in the future. So that's quickly what we do. What I wanted to talk about, what I thought I was supposed to be talking about here was a project that what I'm doing to make cyberspace a citizen space, actually. And I'm indigenizing it, right? So I'm making sure that there's a safe space for us to be in cyberspace. I started this project with this is now ancient technology, it's called the Palace. It was a graphical chat space. So it was a space in which these are little avatars, these little smiley faces. So that's the first generation physical avatar. And you can see people's what people say with little text balloons, and there's imagery behind them. So this space is customizable, or was customizable, and so I customized it and created a project called Cyber Powwow, in which I invited artists, Indigenous artists first only, to come and learn how to make spaces on the internet, and to talk about being Indigenous together, being technical people together, being modern people together, and art. It went on from 1997 to 2004. That's more of how it looked. That's me back then. So an important part of Cyber Powwow was what Donna said was true. It's not just about being online. The physical human interaction is so important. And so Cyber Powwow had gathering spaces established across actually the world eventually. This is Ohrt here in Montreal, an artist-run center, and that's my mom and cousin and little cousin, and so not just my family was in it, but that just happens to be me. But I wanted to show you that it was especially at that time. Remember, not everybody had a computer at home. Certainly not everyone had a modem or a connection, and fewer Indigenous people had that. So it was really important to set up spaces that were warm and inviting, where there was food, and where there was somebody there to host them and say, come on in, have a seat in front of this computer. Look, you just press this button, look, this is how it works. And that's how Cyber Powwow became successful. Another important thing to tell you is that the artists who created the Palace and Cyber Powwow, we also met in person. We went to the Banff Center for the Arts and had a residency in which we worked together and helped each other to build it. And we ate together. Another important thing that we do, I think, is that we teach youth how to do this too. So the Skins workshops teach kids how to make video games and also machinima, which are movies in virtual environments. That's the video I skipped. I was going to show you one, but I'm worried I'm going to take too much time. Lisa says I should show it. You've seen it, Lisa. Just another we're expanding our workshop. So this is a 3D printing workshop. So we teach character design, first of all, and we bring in our future thing. What are your descendants going to look like in 7 generations? And they imagine and draw with paper and pencil what these characters will look like, and then we show them in this workshop how to actually bring it into a 3D modeling program and eventually print it. And then we had a little exhibition at the high school where we did this, and it was so fun. So Second Life is another program. It's a now more current program, but it's like the Palace all grown up. 3D avatars now. You see like this girl here. 3D spaces you can build. Most importantly to me is that you can customize it just like the Palace. And so you can make movies in it. That's what I do. That's my personal art practice. I think I just was showing you the different ones I've made. So I make I tell these stories that are basically indigenous traditional stories but set in the future or with a twist in the future. But I guess what I really want to tell you is that I'm still doing this thing of trying to invite people into cyberspace and creating safe spaces that are indigenously determined. So activating Aboriginal Island is our space in Second Life that we have. Oh, I know why I showed you all those, because all those sets that I make from the machinimas, they're sort of open for you to come and visit. So I create these indigenous spaces in these movies, but then I open them up for people to come and visit. So people can come here, all of you are invited to come and join us at Aboriginal Island. And one thing, if any of you ever visits Second Life, you will know that it can be kind of empty and lonely. So what we've done in order to try to fix that is we are there once a week. So we promote on Facebook and all the social media that every Thursday at 2 p.m. there's myself and or members of my team at AbTech hanging out in Second Life in Aboriginal Island to welcome you. And we're there, we're like, hey, come on, how's it going? Just hang out, or do you want a tour? Do you know how to change your avatar? Would you like us to show you how to build a snowman? Which is like a 3D modeling basic lesson. So that's just a very tiny portion of what we're doing and what I think, how I think of space and how I think of being a citizen.
Thank you. So another definition of space, again, a human construction for human beings. And we'll hear the fourth angle on that question of space and then have the discussion.
Well, also from my side, thanks for inviting me. So I'm the director of an art center venue in the heart of Brussels. And I also have this small presentation, a few slides only. That's our venue. And already introduced to you in a great mix of, I think, French and English, but officially it's called Beursschouwburg. But of course a lot of people struggle with that name, and I will hang my introduction onto that. Because when I arrived there as the artistic and general director 7 years ago, one of the discussions, the venue exists for more than 50 years, so changing the name would be kind of a statement. And I didn't want to make statements, I wanted to make a nice environment. So the discussion was how can we use it instead as something that is helping us instead of something that's blocking us. To tell you a bit about that, how does that work? Yeah, like that. This is my venue. It's a multidisciplinary venue in the very city center. So we do, apart from performing arts, we do concerts, we do talks, we do visual art, we do screenings of contemporary new filmmakers, so on. And this is all in small scale, because there's a lot of rooms, but there's no big space where you could present stuff for like 800,000 people. That's not at stake. I think it's an advantage in our case, because we can really focus on developing arts. So we focus on a young audience. Mainly our main audience now is between 18 and 35 years old. So we have a very young audience, and that's also part of our target, our mission. But when I started, one of the challenges was how can you create an identity again? Because if we're very honest, I think the venue was a bit searching for identity. And the answer to that is not clear, but what we said is like, well, I think everybody has multiple identities. So let's start from that idea, that everybody is fabricated of lots of identities together. I can give examples. There's a lot of people in this room that probably will say that art is very important in their life. But I hope for all of you that there's also other things important in your life. So it's to everybody's benefit, I guess. So we based ourselves on that, and it's a bit the same idea with this one. I start from the very simple example that we didn't have our name on the front of the facade, and that we wanted to have something on the facade that would be clear about those multiple identities. And that's what you see there in the blue. That's the name of Beursschouwburg, this unpronounceable venue in the city center. I have to tell you why it's unpronounceable. Also in Brussels it's unpronounceable. Because 48% of the people in Brussels are native Brussels, which means that 52% of the people in Brussels came there and come from somewhere else, which makes Brussels, after Dubai, the most migrant city in the world. Dubai is another case, there's a lot of slavery there. This said, that's a challenge in Brussels. So if you want to create identity, it should be multiple identity, because otherwise you're lost. If you create one identity, then you're attracting just this very small amount of people that can read the word Beursschouwburg. So we asked an artist, and it's a German artist called Helwig, to create our identity as part of our facade. And he created 9 versions of the word Beursschouwburg, and all of them are wrongly spelled.
What does it mean in English?
It basically is the theater at a stock exchange. Because Schouwburg is like in German Schaubühne, the theater, and Beurs is the Dutch word for stock exchange, because we're like 100 meters away from the stock exchange. But nobody knows. Yeah, but nobody knows. So what we said, like, and this project is very nice because it puts a layer on top of it. What you can see if you look at all those wrongly spelled words of Beursschouwburg is we all took them from real spelling mistakes, which means that it's all people who wrote to us and say Beursschouwburg or whatever, and we use them. And why is that? Because we said our identity is not the main issue here. If you address us with Beursschouwburg and it reaches us and we can answer to you, that's fine, then we're there. So we kind of put it in a positive way, and that's why we put it also on our front. It's the start of a story, because we did that in 2012 and it's still there. It was meant to be there hanging for 1 year, and by now it's hanging there for 6 years. In 2015 we had an anniversary. We had the existence of Beursschouwburg as an art center for 50 years, and we redid this kind of idea. So if you go from top to down, it's Beursschouwburg, and then we said it's under construction since 1965, because we're always changing. There is no stable point in Beursschouwburg. It's really, if you look at the history of the venue, it's true. So we said we're under construction. There's nothing finished here. There's nothing that is stable that you can build on, and that's fine. So if you come to us, it's fine that we're still under construction. We're unpredictable, and we're also unpronounceable. Which also has something to do with identity. If it's fixed and it's stable and you take it very serious, we have a lot of problems with nationalism in Belgium, then it's a problem. For us it was the other way around. The fact that it's unpronounceable, that our identity is multi-layered, we take it in our advantage and not as something that we have to claim. It's another picture of that. And the result of that is, since that period, we have been working a lot on all kinds of public programming, making the mix of people, of course aiming on those people between 18 and 35. We're not aiming at other groups. That's a decision, you could also decide otherwise. And it attracted us a lot of people that now discover us and feel like our venue is the venue they feel at home, which for me would be the key thing in talking about venues and spaces. Is if you don't feel at home, then all the rest is very difficult to achieve. We can talk about it later as well when it comes to topics.
Thank you. So we have, as you can see, we have different definitions and different challenges. I think the first question I would ask is, we all realize that all these spaces, no matter what they have been built and are human construction, sometimes with a very solid initial vision, like your vision. Sometimes it's organizations that you are managing, but that existed before you. So my question is more, and so those spaces have been designed, they have a purpose. If we ask the question, why would the citizens now, in your country or worldwide, why would they need spaces like that now? What's from their perspective? Because we understand now what the perspective of the artist is, or the perspective of the cultural mediator, all that. But from the perspective of the citizens, why do you think that your spaces are needed? Are they enough needed? Can you make them, more urgently needed in this world? So why is it important to think about those questions? So who wants to start?
I think it's very important. I don't think it never was not important. I would say in the States, it's very important because of the political divide that we're currently experiencing. And art is one of the few venues where I think people can still find themselves where there is a mutual respect for the art, which allows us to transcend perhaps our beliefs or political ideology. I have a client that is a complete opposite of my political beliefs, but when we're working in a museum, we're good. As long as we stay inside that museum. We are focused on the work, on the art, because otherwise I don't understand her. I just don't understand. But we can both look at this art and talk about it and how we want to build audiences and what the result of that might be. So we need safe spaces. We need spaces that allow us to transcend what we're still struggling with as a person to figure out where do I fit in society. I think art gives us the landscape to be able to explore that in a very respectful way.
So safety, that's one definition of citizenship now in this world. You know, being a citizen is to be safe somewhere. Not everywhere, but it's really important. What is your take?
you know, I have some troubles with the word citizenship. As a Mohawk person, you know, for us, for Indigenous people in Canada, we had to, well, in the past, our people had to give up their native status in order to become citizens. Citizenship was not granted to us until 1960. And many Mohawk and Iroquois people do not want to be citizens of Canada. We're already citizens of the Iroquois Confederacy. So that's just a little aside. What I want to talk about is, to respond to your question, is why it's important to have a space like the two that I described. For many of you, you know, many people here probably already know that the statistics about Indigenous people are very dire. We still have the highest dropout rate, the highest incarceration rate, and the highest suicide rate in Canada. And I started to think, you know, wow, maybe it's because we don't see ourselves in the future, that we have such a crappy future at this time. And so I wanted to make sure that that's my reason. So I want my need to be less urgent. You said, how can we make it more urgent?
Yeah.
But I need it to be less urgent. I would like it to be, so I think,
Kind of a distanciation, in a sense.
I don't understand that word, but
Create a distance.
distance from the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I also think that what I do think is urgent in this country is education. So a thing I've been doing as a parent is trying to get a program into my kids' school. And it's a very, very simple program at my kids' elementary school, in which each year the kids are subjected to or get the opportunity to meet one Indigenous person. And first it's a storytelling and a singing, and then as we go up in the grades, they become a little more meaty. We do the blanket exercise, which some of you might know about, which is quite a political exercise, which talks about but what I'm noticing is that it's so not enough. So what happened with me is it took me 2 years to get the program started in the school. Then I finally had a great partner in my vice principal, and then my vice principal left and I had to restart. So it has to be beyond the individuals. It has to be in the curriculum. So basically it has to be institutionalized. So this is what I finally realized is that, and that's why institutional change has to happen. Like across the board. It cannot be these individuals anymore. We have to take this on as a society.
Yep. I know about that. What is your opinion?
Well, for us at Danse, we work with contemporary dance. We work with the human body. So in the times we live in, we're always in front of our screens. We're emailing. In the same way that at some point you need to pick up the phone and speak to one person instead of sending back and forth emails. The same way, you need to be going in to see some real flesh and blood that are provoking emotions to the audience. So it's a question of balance. So that's, would be our main function in the ecology, if you want. It's also again around the human side. Oops. But we also need balance in all of this, though. So we're part of it. Like in the same way that when you have a vinyl, some vinyl record lovers also have their their iPods. Well, you know, in our world, the world we live in, we need balance. So that's one thing that we give to people with giving them flesh and blood on stage with fragility, with everything that a human being has is now on stage and accessible.
And Tom, we talked when we had the discussion on the phone, we were also talking about, you know, so what you offer in that space that is relevant for people, for real people?
Well, I can't answer in their place, of course, but my main answer to your question would be, I think we still need places where people are not treated as consumers. And in our times, this is something which is really, there's less and less space for that. So I think in the best case, in the ideal world, an art center should be a place where people are dealt with as people, with other needs than only consuming. And I'm not against the consuming part, I just say that they're multi-layered, so they also have other needs. And to address that would be my main goal, and my main reason why I think people still come to an art center. This said, I'm a bit wary for the idea that we have to watch out as a cultural field, that we have to fill in all the needs and the goals that are put at stake at a certain moment in time. I think when it comes to solving all the big issues in the world, I always have to, I see that there's always a lot of questions raised towards the arts, but in general I'm saying like there's a lot of those questions that first should be solved through politics or economy, and they don't solve it, so why would we?
Yeah, but it's one thing to solve it, it's one thing to debate it.
Sure.
So the question of ignoring those big issues, do you think it's an avenue, or, you know? So because one thing is to solve it, and obviously it's the responsibility of all of us, including the people we elect, but there's also the question of debating those issues, making sure that they could be, as you said, addressed in safe spaces, and try to find new.
The place where this discussion can happen, of course, should be also part of an art center for us. I have this sloganesque, I know it's a bit sloganesque, approach to what we are doing in our venue is that our mission officially says we're busy with high arts, meaning everything that has to do with fine arts. But we added very, very consciously to it that we're also busy with low arts, being that we like to party, we like a good DJ, we like stuff that is considered low art, but that I consider as part of human being. It's also this multi-layered thing. I'm not only loving an experimental dance show, I'm also liking a Netflix TV show. That's the low art part, and that the third part that we also want to be active in, and that's I think a challenge for a lot of venues still, is we also have to make our hands dirty and do something that has to do with no art, meaning everything that is topicality, discussions about decolonization, feminism, call them. I think they're at stake at this very moment, and that instead of just giving platform, we have to be active in them. So that's what we try to do.
In terms of before opening the discussion with the floor, in terms of the future, so not like the immediate future, like a year from now, but let's say 5-10 years from now, do you think that what you do in all of your different spaces will need to be changed and reinvented? Do you will need some refoundation, or do you think that you see kind of you have a road, you have a path that you have to follow and just keep persisting on that path? So how do you imagine, you know, the future 5-10 years from now in your space?
In our space, well, we hear a lot, think big, but coming from a person that actually we are, you know, we present large show and we speak to a large audience. But I think we need to take a step back and think smaller as well. I think partnerships, we need to think for smaller portions of the population and all, the artists as well. So that's what my motto would be for the next 5 or 10 years is like, okay, we still need to present the large shows into a large portion of people, but within that, we need to think smaller, like micro actions. It's just like when you're doing Pilates, you're reinforcing the core with micro movements. So we need to be reinforcing our core with micro actions.
So you want to play with the notion of scales?
Yep. Well, without changing the scale of what we present, that's not the objective. But we're changing the scale of the action that we're day to day putting on the table. Yes.
I think certainly in the States it will be engaging more of our immigrant community as part of mainstream audiences. Right now it's still very much French and border line in terms of are they important. And I think the more we can acknowledge the cultural diversity of the United States, I think we'll see an expansion that will be quite exciting. Right now, it is pretty much, African Americans, white, and some, Latino. But when we think about how the world comes to the United States, and even now more so than ever, creating a place where that's respected and where they have a stake in how culture is designed and presented, I think it will really be a wonderful experience for all to make the States more global from a cultural perspective, not just that we let you in, but actually you can help to dictate and design what the arts experience can be.
You were mentioning before the panel that the National Endowment for the Arts in the U.S. is really pushing for that agenda in a quite consistent and persistent way.
Yes.
Do you feel that it starts to produce real sustainable results? How do you... What's the role, because we mentioned the role of the institutions as opposed to just one leaders or a group of people trying to do something, institutionalizing, as the people who say in English. So what do you think about...
Well, I think, we talk about arts audience in the States, certainly that for, nonprofit organizations began pretty much in the 60s with the National Endowment for the Arts and other funding agencies. So now that generation is pretty much dying off of that first generation, and now in their 80s and 90s, so it has to be replaced. So who's next? Of course, there are those of us who are coming behind that, the millennials and the boomers, but you also look at it from a diverse perspective, and that's why I think the United States has so much room to grow in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that when we look at this plateau of what the audiences will look like, how you look at success, it will be when you look in the audience, you start to see who's in the streets. So it's not just people you pass or selling in the bodega or sweeping the floors, but those people as arts audiences. That's what I think, the NEA would be looking for as well as any funder, realizing, as my colleague has said to us earlier outside, it takes time. So it's not something that's going to happen in 1 or 2 years. It is definitely an extensive, laborious process. But it's the only way, I think, that we will really be able to grow in a sustainable way. Looking at the next generation and the one after that, will be embracing who's coming into the States and honoring that these are people who have a story to tell, and that narrative needs to be celebrated as well.
So diversity as a driver for the next 5-10 years.
Absolutely.
What's your take? The future. You are already in the future. The future.
5 years.
Future. 5 years.
Well, I mean, in the first place, I know that the technologies that we work with, they're constantly changing. So that's a huge problem for me. You're constantly trying to catch up with that. So that's something I've been trying to really figure out, because I am still seduced by technology. I still love to go online and to be in those places. But yeah, that's a problem. And then one thing that I think is really changing is the inclusion of Indigenous people in the academy, and also and therefore somehow to me they're related in the art world. So we're just seeing so many young people going through the university process and getting higher and higher degrees. And so I think in 5 to 10 years we're going to have more professors teaching in the universities. It's already happening now. And so I think that's going to change the the conversation. And it's going to bring it forward in a way that we've been hoping for and that we've been pushing it for 25 years.
I so agree with you. I had the privilege to spend a lot of time during the summer with Douglas Cardinal, because he was presenting in Venice a show with indigenous architects coming from the US and Canada at the back of the turtle. And he was telling me that the first generation of indigenous people going to university, everybody wanted to be a lawyer, to fight for the rights, and then eventually architects. And so we see that happening, and it will have a big impact in the future.
Yeah. Now they're in anthropology.
Yeah, interesting. And what do you think?
Well, I can connect to everything that's said. I think that one of the big challenges is absolutely there. It's hard to look into the future. My biggest feeling is, apart from all the things, the important things that are already said, I think if we want to really survive as an experimental art field, I think we should really open up. So I did this small introduction already on this idea of connecting high art and low art. I think it's very important in order for people to really feel a place as a place of them, that they can enter and feel at home. We shouldn't be only focusing on the fine arts as such, but we should really say this is also a part of where we can meet and where we can have a party together and where we can have discussion and disagree, which is perfectly fine. There's also something in this polarized world that we have to learn again, apparently. It's a bit sad to realize that after so many years we have to learn again how to communicate with each other, but I think it's at stake. So I think that's a challenge. Maybe it's not a very optimistic challenge for the future, but I think that's at least something I feel that we really have to push forward.
I just so agree with what you said, because I think that the idea of class, certainly in the States, is something we don't talk a lot about, but that actually is what differentiates people from coming in or not.
Yeah.
You know, that it's a feeling of whether I belong or I'm good enough or I understand it. And so by diffusing that, you know, that myth that only certain people can understand ballet or jazz or whatever that is, and then honoring, you know, whatever this local dance movement that we're doing, you know, thank you, the evolution of different kinds of music, and getting that the same kind of status as the other established art is important. Secondly, it's important to recognize that what currently we recognize as the masters are not the only ones. So when we talk about classical music, how come it's only dead white composers? What happened to other people of color who have classical music forms? How is that not in the conversation when we talk about classical music? So I think there's a recalibration of how we're defining even the fine arts, which can be much more expansive. And then within that, acknowledging, as you call it, high-low art, and call it diffusing the classicism that comes into the arts experience.
Yeah, those questions of the acknowledgement and validations are becoming a more and more important cultural currency right now.
Exactly.
It's clear, I see that everywhere.
Yeah.
And this distinction, I don't know if it's still real about high art and low art. It is still real. I can see that as a funder. It's there. It's, you know, it drives also the funding in many of our countries. But I think that question of, you know, of seeing the power of acknowledgement, the power of, you're right, of disagreeing, but also the power of being able to agree with something and someone is also really important in our society. So let's take 10 minutes with the floor, and then we'll wrap the conversation with the panelists. So anyone who has any question, remarks to any of our panelists, please. There is a mic.
So
The mic?
there's a mic,
Okay.
very special mic.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Wow, how exciting.
There goes mics.
I'm Hayley Matthews, I'm a dancer from the UK. I just wanted to, I was moved to say that it was really lovely to be invited to think about why citizens need these spaces. Like not just to kind of I suppose to justify ourselves, but also to stand, to get time and space to stand on how we justify ourselves. And I've been sort of percolating what that means for me. So I just wanted to share that, if that's okay, and maybe get your response. So I feel that why citizen scene space, the kind of spaces that we create as arts practitioners and institutions, is that people are isolated in contemporary living, and often they feel uprooted and meaningless, and they have very two-dimensional, well, we have very two-dimensional black and white experiences. Often there's little opportunity for anything other than survival. We don't feel we have space to be ourselves and relate truly and intimately to others. We need to build spaces for three-dimensionality, where we can orient in wellness, where non-frontal grey space experiences that have depth can be had, where being with real and diverse emotional, political, social experience and being with others is available, and where people feel part and are part of what we're doing, and where they feel so connected, they feel that what we're doing is also possible for them.
Thanks. Another comment or question?
Hey, well. My name is Ulrich, I come from Germany. I do theater, street theater. I produce shows since 30 years. And I liked very much what the American lady said. I'm sorry I didn't get your name.
Oh, Donna.
Yeah, I like that very much because I worked a lot in France. I did a lot of social places. I performed in all the HLMs. I was a specialist actually to do that. And I've had some terrible experiences where children and people were beating themselves up to get a good place to see things. And I think you have to grow. As you said, you have to grow the people to come in, to feel invited. My brother, he has a theater in Bavaria, small theater, 150 seats. And he opened it up. He specialized in children's theater, but he also does all kinds of shows. And he was very upset in the beginning because the people didn't come. It was the same thing what you said. And so he wanted to close it down again. I said I can't cope with it because it's on a private basis. But I said hold on, keep on doing good shows and grow your public. And it's now sold out every time. It's a fantastic place that works very well. And I think you have to grow your place. I like that very much what you said. Thank you very much. I appreciated that. And I think you also have to give the people a little bit what they want also. Like first you have to give them a burger, they want a burger with fries, you know, and then slowly you give them a burger with fries, and then you put a leaf salad inside and a gherkin, and then sooner or later you can give them the tofu, you know, and then
I feel that we're close to lunch.
They like it, you know, and I think that's what you have to do. You cannot just imply something immediately and build a, I've seen it so many times. They build an enormous culture center, you know, and with millions and millions of euros or dollars or whatever. And then afterwards nobody goes there. And the people don't understand why that we did give them so much money, why doesn't it work? Thank you very much for what you said. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Anyone else?
Yes?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Bill Wong. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States. I like to question the idea about again from the artist about citizenship and how we're sort of de facto using that as a catch-all for everybody, where in fact it is not, because you are a citizen after the nation state approves your legal status, of which then you become a citizen. Therefore, are we talking about the fact that, of course we're not talking about the fact that if you're not a citizen, this art space is not for you. But the choice of the word of de facto, that a citizen means everybody, in fact, I feel do reflect the fact that the art space, when we use that word for the context of an art space, then we reveal the fact that oftentimes art spaces are for the privileged. So I feel like that's probably not the ethos of this conversation of where everybody's going, but I feel like choice of words and language is important. So I'd like to echo what she has mentioned briefly before.
Any comment?
How do you say tiny? I mean, just, I agree, like, maybe I'm just repeating myself too, but I think that the choice of word was very surprising. I think and I agree that I'm sure that's not the ethos that was meant at all. But I think that I think the citizen is supposed to mean an active participant in society. That's what I think they really meant here.
I think so. I mean, this was not my choice, but I think it's the case. We had many discussions recently in many different places in the world, and I think that the way people define citizenship is not the legal way, it's not the restrictive definition of citizenship, it's more because it's related to the city first, more than a nation. It's being a member of the city, and the idea of being a member of the city, the old definition, is really this question that you have both rights and you have responsibilities because you are a member of the city. So some people are arguing right now that citizenship is something that is more and more limited in the world. When we hear the President of the United States saying that he will change the Constitution, and if you're born in the U.S. on the U.S. ground, you won't be a citizen anymore. So that question of citizenship is a question that is debated all over the world. You're right with indigenous people. One way of trying to erase indigenous people from our country was to define them in the law. The law in Canada was saying that a human being was anyone but an indigenous, Aboriginal people. So that question of who grants citizenship, how can we develop it and see it as more as some kind of an aspirational definition, as opposed to the legal one that the politicians are playing with right now in the world, is a huge question. And in any dictatorship in the world, and in any situation where you have people who have a temptation towards dictatorship, you realize that the first thing they limit and control is this notion of citizenship. So it becomes some kind of a way to talk about freedom, mobility, and all of that, but I think you're right, we should not have a limiting definition of what it is. Otherwise, this is not what you wanted to discuss today. I agree.
Hello.
Maybe a last one, and then we will wrap up because it's almost 1 o'clock.
Can I talk?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So talking about this breaking through the fine art, high art, to connect it with low art, I think there's one aspect that we should really consider is that art should be a little bit friendly or think about commercial, to connect it with the commercial force. Because I think we artists somehow very cautious to be. We always kind of want to isolate us with the commercial power. But actually, if you think about low art, let's say we talk about there is low art, they are pretty much in the commercial sector. Let's say the gaming industry or a lot of concert. They are very commercial driven. I'm just thinking that, and actually the commercial part, the low art, believe me, they even want to connect it with the high art more than the high art want to connect it down with the low art, or equally the same. Because they also want, I think people always also kind of admire art, but they don't know how to get link or access to that. And actually, if it doesn't mean that we should make the art consumer needs more capitalists, but it doesn't mean that we cannot connect, because commercial today is a very main power, a very powerful strength that we cannot ignore, that push the society going on. So we can use the source, like we can use the sponsor, we can use their technology because they have the funding to connect into the art project. So I think that is a way to think about. And about the identity, I would like to think from another side, because we always think how to assimilate the immigrant inside society. And actually, myself, I'm really like floating around. I'm originally Chinese, but now I'm living in Bergen, Norway. I used to live in Brussels, in Nice, France, in Copenhagen, in Hong Kong. I'm really living there, working, studying there. So for myself, actually, I never feel it's a problem to be a guest in a place. I still feel responsible, but I feel I kind of make a collage for my own identity. And I think it will be a trend in more and more people that will floating around. Probably they live in their hometown for the first 10, 15 years, and then they float into another place for the next 10 years. So it's kind of like a collage of the identity. You don't have to force yourself to be assimilated in the society because maybe our destination is to floating. So that's another way to think about how to create the mixed identity. Yeah.
I appreciate your thoughtful ideas. I think they're really, really smart. You know, this idea of floating identity, I do think that not everyone has the fortune to be able to do that. I could not do that, so I'm happy that you're able to do that. I do think when you were talking about the commercial and the blending and utilization of artists with commercial venues is a very smart one, and I believe that when we talk about 10 years from now, I'd like to see more of that, of arts organizations partnering with successful commercial ventures for the purpose of enhancing access and to create a larger platform. Not that we have to diminish the value of the work we're doing. Nothing has to be compromised on either side, but it's absolutely using the strengths that brings to us. Because in the arts, certainly in the States, we have this notion of nonprofit means poverty, and I am so done with that. I think that we really have to move from, oh boy, we just made it, to thriving. You know, and so in order to do that, we have to look at successful business models. One of the things that NCHPAC is doing very well is creating streams of income. So yes, we're a performing arts center, we are a nonprofit, but we own a real estate building with 250 apartments. We're about to construct a hotel and conference center. And then we're going to build a school, a charter school from pre-K to elementary. You know, we have to think more expansively. How else do we utilize what's working and infuse that into the arts so that we actually elevate what the arts can bring to the community? So I really appreciate your thinking. It's great. Keep going.
Thank you. So we'll wrap up. I will just ask each of the panelists just for 30 seconds, a minute, just to say what is your takeaway from that conversation we just had. What will you use, you think, in the next year in your work? Tom.
Yeah, I'm still hanging in this last remark, I have to say.
You're still floating.
Yeah, well, I'll do my best. I'm not that good in floating as the example just given. But no, what would I take? I mean, for me, low art isn't just something which is falling together with commercial environment. There's a lot of low art that is as experimental and as non-commercial to me as so. Of course, I agree with the remarks, but it's not.
And there's a lot of art, let's be honest, especially visual art, that is very, very financial and very, very commercial.
So I think, yeah.
There's no purity anymore.
No.
What's your takeaway?
I really enjoyed a lot of what you had to say. I think that what did you say? I was like, I want to talk to this guy later, and now I'm like, yeah. I think my takeaway is, realizing that we're all in this together, about the humanizing spaces, that's one thing that I think we all said in different ways, that the human aspect is important. And I mean, for myself, a lot of people often think I'm a robot because I like cyberspace so much, but I really, really think it is. I am not a robot. I can write down your
We talked about those when we see each other.
So, yeah, mainly that's it. Still trying to remember what I was going to say something about. Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to...
Your mic.
You lost your mic.
This is so creative. This one go back. Do I have to speak into it? Oh, okay. I appreciate the opportunity to learn from my colleagues just about different ways of engaging in the arts and how we look at this notion of space as well as participation. I'm always looking for more. I think that just as I look around the room, I want to see more diversity more from different countries, not just race and ethnicity, but geography, class, wealth. And so I think the more we can be as inclusive as possible and look to our right and left and see who's not here, then let's take action to bring them next time. Let's make sure that, you know what, I think this person would really appreciate this. What can I do to help change this narrative so it doesn't always look the same, but then next time there is going to be a difference because we've all made that specific effort. So that's what I would ask for each of us to do.
Thank you. Le mot de la fin, c'est à toi.
Le mot de la fin. Oh, not in French. So I'm just very, very honored to have been here today, and it reminds me that we don't take a lot of time to sit down and to, of course I talk today, but to sit down and to listen and to take the time and to have those conversations. So that's what I'm going to take home tonight, is just, okay, tomorrow let's get up and take the time again. And I wonder who said that, but I'm going to say it again because I heard it. There's a great movie, documentary movie on Louise de Cavalier, who's an artist from here. And there's one thing that that she said in the movie, and that it's great humility, and that's one other thing that we should all be taking home is humility. And she says, when I get up in the morning, I just say to myself, I do not know nothing. And who said that? It didn't say that. Or maybe it was before I was speaking with someone. And just, yeah, that's what I'm going to take home, and that's what I'm going to wake up to tomorrow morning, is to wake up and to have eyes wide open, listen, and know more, and learn every day. Yeah.
So, thank you very much. It was a very
Thank you.
good conversation to be continued. On a terminé. Merci beaucoup.